I'm Mike DeLuca. Welcome to this rare, in-the-trenches look at the craft of screenwriting. Today I'm joined by Nia Vardalos, who wrote the script for Connie and Carla, as well as the gigantic independent film hit, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, for which she earned an Oscar nomination. Welcome, thanks for being here.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
Now, you're of Greek lineage, but you were raised in Canada. Mm-hmm. Is there any Greco-Canadian cuisine I should know about?
Yeah, there are things like, well, we like moussaka, and if you use Canadian eggplants, I just don't want to...
How do you do a Canadian accent on top of a Greek accent?
Oh, it's actually, you have to oot and aboot it all the time. Yeah, so instead of moussaka, I guess it would be like moussaka.
That makes the eating more enjoyable.
Yeah.
And you got a scholarship to study acting?
I did. I went to a theater school called Ryerson in Toronto, and within minutes realized it was a giant mistake, and I did not fit in. And it was one of the first moments in my life that I realized to not try to fit in. I was not going to be a regular actress and be an actress for hire. I didn't learn my lesson. I continued to try and bang my head against a brick wall.
You worked a lot in television.
I like, not enough, but I worked in television. I mostly worked at Second City, which I loved.
Okay.
I went to Second City.
In Canada or Chicago?
Both.
Okay.
I worked in Canada, and the Chicago producers came up to look at the show, and the last person that they brought down was Mike Myers. And so I guess they were looking for just people to bring down, and they said to me, do you want to come and work in Chicago? And I was like, do I? It was, for me, an opportunity to live in another country and work at the original Second City and write material, and the improv was completely different.
Right. Were you familiar with the history associated with Second City in Chicago?
Very much so. I'd seen all the, in London, Ontario, they have the archives. So I would take home old tapes and see
great.
Ed Asner and Alan Arkin, and it was really cool, and so I really wanted to work there. And in Canadian improv, it's always, improv is keep the ball in the air. And in Canadian improv, it's like, may I have the ball? Thank you. And then you keep it in the air and you pass it on. And in America, it was like, give me that ball. Give me that ball. Hold on.
That sums up the whole geopolitical situation, actually.
Yeah, so it was an experience, definitely. But I learned at Second City it's great preparation for Hollywood, because there's no crying in comedy.
Right.
You know, you got to be a tough girl, and people got fired around me all the time.
Is it competitive?
Very, very. I mean, Lauren Michaels would come through and scout every 18 months or so, and oh man, you have never seen more cutthroat improv in your life.
What pushed you to study acting in the first place?
I have no idea. I just knew I was going to do it from the time I was 6. My whole family's funny, but I'm the only one that gets paid for it. They're ridiculous, all of them.
Do you pull material, apart from your film, but do you pull material still from your real life experiences?
Oh yeah. I think that's I think the secret to happiness, to living in this city, is you have to have a real life. You have to have a real family, not just to pull material from, but to be happy around. And so I just went to Chicago recently and saw my cousins, and my parents were there, and So it's
like a recharging the battery?
It really is. I just sat there and listened to them instead of me being on. They're the funniest people, just telling a story. Anything that they tell is funny.
Do you live here now?
I live in Los Angeles now, yeah.
Does your acting or the study of acting influence your writing now?
Yeah, because I think what it is, I have no idea of my physical limitations. I sometimes forget I'm a girl. And because at Second City, if I wanted to play a Native American character, I would just part my hair in the middle, braids, walk out, and you could be anything you wanted in improv. And like if they called for Jesus, if you're in the wings, you'd walk out and you were Jesus. And so sometimes when I'm writing, I of course play all the characters, and it's the only way I think that I can write dialogue if I speak it out loud and have everyone talking to each other.
Okay, and that's still something you do to this day? How does improv work exactly? Like, I know for a lot of us who just admire the people that have come from those places, you hear stories about, people call out stuff and you have to deal with it on stage. Is that really how it works?
It really is. If you try to pre-plan something, it shows horribly, and you will instantly be marked with disdain by your castmates. So you have to come in with no preconceived notion and just stand on stage and just wait for something to hit you. The best thing to do is not edit and just go with it, and that's actually how I write. I start with an idea, fade in, and just go. I don't go back and fix at all. Occasionally I'll get another idea and realize this script is not this script, it's about the sister, and I'll just veer off. And then go back and fix page 1 to 30 and make it about the sister.
Okay. Do you outline before you start writing a screenplay?
I don't really. The only thing recently, I just now I'm writing. It's like I'm living someone else's life.
Right.
So
a writer's life now.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And so I have this project with the lovely folks at Revolution Studios, and they had an idea, just a title, and that's all they had, a title, and said I could write whatever I wanted and play whatever I wanted.
I'm dying. You have to let me ask you what the idea is.
The title that they gave me was I Hate Valentine's Day.
Not a bad jumping off point.
Yeah, you can see the poster. So I don't really write for hire. I usually just kind of,
right.
I have an idea about this, and I'll write this, and then try to sell it.
Right.
This was the opposite, and so I said, I think I could do that. So I went in 10 days later and told them an idea, and they bought it, and I was like, suckers. God, I'm so full of shit.
They'll never see this. Some people at Revolution should be checking out a program about screenwriting, because they'll probably never see it.
And so, that's a completely different way of writing for me. That I actually told them what the idea was going to be, but I tried to not be too detail-oriented,
right.
because I know that if they got stuck on one thing that they loved, and then as I'm improvising writing, that goes out the
right.
window, I knew I would run into problems.
Does the acting or the experience in improv give you insight into other aspects of writing besides dialogue and character?
Definitely story, because I just kind of try to follow what's in my heart that day and just kind of write that way.
Is improv kind of like a wandering narrative where, eventually, even if it's a spur of the moment, you're taking it to a conclusion?
Yes. Definitely. What we always learned is that the ending is in the beginning. And even if it's just this faintest hint of the beginning, it usually is there. So I try to lay out where I'm going from the beginning. What is this character's problem? And obviously I write from a character point of view, not a story point of view. And again, I don't know what I'm doing.
Do you have comedy or just writing gurus in general, or people that have kind of influenced you, or the people that you talked to before you wrote the script?
I definitely do, and the luckiest thing that happened to me since the explosion of my Big Fat Greek Wedding is I got to meet writers that I admired, writer-directors like Alexander Payne and like Paul Haggis. And I asked them questions that I wanted to know really for my own edification, like how do you write and what do you do? And I found out no one likes it. We all hate it, and that was really like therapy for me, because I hate it. It's very lonely, and I have a voice in my head that tells me I'm a faker and I should never be here. And the minute it comes out of the printer, I'm like, I wrote this. It's mine. Nobody touch a word, I'll kill you.
The trauma of giving it over to people.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Second City, too, that taught me to just be tough, because you get notes in the room and you hear, the stupidest thing you've ever experienced in your life sometimes from a studio executive that you adore, and they'll say something, and that has to be part of the process. It's a big dialogue, and you have to be able to be open to it, but also to keep your vision clear.
As an aspiring actress, what first made you think you could write a script?
Desperation. Just purely trying to get an agent.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
Oh, so the first impulse was to use it as a way to get an agent?
Yeah, I couldn't get an agent to keep me for longer than a couple of months, and I was dropped by everybody. They kept saying that the problem was that I was Greek and not a visible minority, and not a visible minority? Not a visible minority.
Did they think you were an invisible minority?
Like the woman said, you're not white, you're not ethnic, I don't know what you are. And I said, I'm Greek. And she said, don't tell people that. I'm going to tell them you're Hispanic.
Did you keep a list so after the movie was a hit, you could call people and go, how you like me now? Did you do that?
Yeah. I actually had a moment that was so, do you remember on Rhoda, when Rhoda gets asked out, and I think the guy refers to her as being overweight, and then years later she's slim and she's in the elevator, and she sees him again and he asks her out or something, and I'm probably just completely...
No, the only Rhoda episode I remember is the wedding one.
Yeah, the wedding one where she
But I loved Rhoda, but I don't remember this one, but did she get revenge?
She gets this moment where she tells the guy off and says, an elephant never forgets. And it was just like, every girl's dream to be able to say that. Well, I had that moment. Two people had approached me during the play when I had the screenplay.
Now the play was a one-woman show?
The play was a one-woman show, and I had written the screenplay, didn't have an uncle that ran a studio, and couldn't get it read by anybody. Had a couple of agents who just kind of flicked it across the desk and went, what? You're an actress. Whoever told you could write a screenplay? And I had this screenplay and thought, how am I going to get this thing read? And at best, I thought I would play a bridesmaid, and I would have been happy with that. And then I thought, well, why don't I just jump up on stage like Jeff Garland does, like Julia Sweeney does, and just do it as a one-person show, even though I'm not a stand-up. Maybe I could do it that way.
Okay.
So I jumped up on stage, played all the characters, hoping really just to get an agent.
Right. Had you seen other one-person shows?
Yeah, I had seen quite a bit.
Okay.
Quite a few. I went around purely as a spy just to see what people were doing, and realized there are certain things like don't use the stage as therapy. Don't you?
Right.
You know, if people are there, please don't tell them about your uncle touching you. No one wants to know. And so I tried to make it like light and fun, but also to have some depth in it, like Julia Sweeney's show, which is about cancer, and yet you're laughing and
wonderful
crying.
show. Yeah, wonderful show.
And Jeff Garland's show as well. I Want Someone to Eat Cheese With is something, he's a great storyteller. So I wanted to tell a story, and so I was doing it, and I had a lawyer at the time because I was doing quite a bit of voiceover work. And
how did you fall into that?
Someone told me I had a sexy voice.
Okay, so I guess it's true, by the way. But I guess now that was visible. Your minority status was invisible, but your voice was visible.
Interesting, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But again, as an actress, I was not on camera.
Right.
After years of being on stage, I came to LA, couldn't get a job. And so I was on stage doing the play, and the agents did not come, but Rita Wilson and Tom Hanks came.
Wow, so that was really how it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
How did they learn about the show?
I had been doing the show for about 9 months, and it had started to sell out because I was going to church and handing out flyers. And I know my mom said, "Oh, the icons are going to weep." And so.
Now, were you raised Greek Orthodox?
Yeah, raised Greek Orthodox. So I went to church, and I know that we're starved for stories about us, and so that's why I wrote the screenplay. Because when the agent said the problem is that you're Greek, I thought, well, why aren't there Greek parts?
Right.
So I'm not really into the whole. Actors can be whiners, and people can sit around and wait for the phone to ring.
Right.
And there's nothing worse sometimes than being, well, there's many things worse, but for me, the experience of sitting in an audition room and hearing the loser stories and which I think are hilarious. There's nothing funnier to me than a loser story.
Right.
Like seeing my ex-boyfriend after the movie came out and a bird shit on my head. Why couldn't I have a cool moment?
Right.
So that's funny, but.
That's supposed to be good luck, by the way.
I know, right? And it's happened to me
Right.
twice. So I kind of like the idea of sitting around, but there was no irony in their voices, and they were telling about, oh, I went to network for this show, and
Right. So real
this person-
spirit's been beaten down.
Yeah, and I thought, I can't be in this room. I can't. It's like they're giving each other permission to fail before they go in. And I thought, rather than whine about it that there are no Greek parts, I'm going to write one.
Right. How did you learn the format of a screenplay?
I had done a couple of movies that went direct to video. I had 6 lines in that one and 20 lines in that one. And
Right.
I looked at a screenplay and I looked at the format and I thought, what is the difference between 111 pages or my uncle telling a hilarious story at the table? Beginning, middle, and end, arc,
That's
exaggeration.
interesting. You applied practicality to the process.
I did. I just applied simple storytelling. I didn't know about that you have to break your characters by this page.
Right.
I know it now, I don't pay attention to it.
Right.
I don't pay attention to rules and format or anything.
So you're not rigid when it comes to these rules?
No, I actually think rules, okay, the oldest cliche in the book, that rules are made to be broken and
Right.
all these things. Sure, for some movies, rules do apply,
Right.
and you should stick to the format, but it doesn't work for me. And the one thing that I try to tell new screenwriters and people who want to do this for a living is, don't use my process, don't use his process.
Right.
What's yours? And even that word process and,
Right.
craft.
It makes it sound like cheese.
Yes, yeah.
So it's what you kind of feel your way.
I do. I do. Well, through life.
Right.
Through it all, I just kind of, does this work? Does this feel right?
Right.
And it's mostly, when you write something and you think, I'm awesome for one page. The next page, you're like, I stink,
Right.
And that's just it. And eventually it will all smooth out and it'll be like less stink through the whole thing.
What's the hardest part of screenwriting for you?
Sitting down every day and starting.
The discipline of it. Is that something that's improved for you over time?
No.
It's still a pain in the ass?
It's a pain in the ass, it really is. If I will put it off all day. I will clean the house. I will have sex with the neighborhood before I will sit down and write a script.
Are you working on anything right now?
Let me give you my address.
So you procrastinate until you have to do it?
Have to do it, yeah. Have to do it. But then it doesn't work for me to be under the gun, to be under looming deadlines. So what I've tried to do is just say, if you sit down by 10 a.m., just sit down by 10 a.m. and write. And then I just don't force it. If
Right.
by 2 I can't do it anymore, I go shopping. I, garden.
Right.
I play with my dog.
So you're not rigid about that either. The kind of some writers will adhere to a discipline where they're just going to sit there until they get 10 pages or whatever.
Doesn't work for me at all. I can't. You can't force creativity.
Right.
But I do force myself to sit and stare. And if something comes out, great. And if I'm writing till 10 at night or till the next day, sometimes I don't come out of that office because something happens, and for 24 hours I'm in a zone, and it's great. But the next day, bink, nothing.
Was there a big difference between writing for a studio with your revisions on Connie and Carla as opposed to your own project, which was produced independently? Was there a big difference in those two experiences?
Well, the thing about Playtone, they were brand new. Tom Hanks and Gary Getzman had formed this company, and Rita Wilson found me and then brought the play to them. And they treated me like gold before that movie made a dime.
Right.
And the hardest thing was finding the confidence that these people seemed to have in me. When we were in rewrites on that, they would say, let's say, well, the first draft I handed in to them was very long, and they'd say, perhaps we could cut this story or that story. And I would, dutifully write down what they said, and they said, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, what do you want?
Is that a trick question?
Yeah, exactly. I kept expecting them to, rip off their masks and drink my blood. I really could not believe that they were that good. They were that kind. Always saying, Nia, it's your movie. What? And so that was amazing. And then I went into a completely different experience.
Right. The studio system.
Studio system. And there are more notes, there are more people there, but it was not, I was never treated badly, always great, and just, there are more people involved in the process. That's it.
Did you take away any specific lessons for writing from your Second City experiences?
Definitely. Just if it doesn't feel right, cut it.
Right.
I had a director say, we're not here for the little laughs, get it out, And so I would always think, even if I loved it and it meant something, and there was a thing in My Big Fat Greek Wedding that always worked well in the play, and it was referring to how, as a kid, Greek parents are so afraid of their kids catching a cold, so they didn't want us to go out for Halloween. Plus, my dad would say, I didn't come to this country with $8 in my pocket so my child could go out and beg for candy. He'd be furious. Right. So I wanted to go out for Halloween, and it's Winnipeg, and it's October 31st, and it's freezing. So my parents said, okay, you can go out as a ballerina, but you have to wear the ballerina costume over your snowsuit.
So you put a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man effect probably ensued.
Like a weeble, like just going in there with a hood, So I just thought that was hilarious. But of course, it does. We had so much preamble in the screenplay that it was just like a slice, like cut. And I also got to be involved in the editing. I got to watch everything.
Oh, in the editing room?
Yeah. Which is a humbling experience as an actress. You have to drive there, just saying, you're fatter than you think, and your nose is way bigger than you thought.
Right.
Get over yourself. And it's really quite good, and it helps me as an actor as well. But that was interesting because I saw, you just slice the top and bottom of a scene and take the meat, and that's your scene.
The middle.
Yeah, so that helped my writing too.
And that quality of being able to edit your own work kind of came from your experience at Second City?
It definitely did. The way it works at Second City is the first 2 acts are material that we wrote months ago.
Okay.
And the third act is completely improvised. So we would give you the first 2 acts as the audience, and then we'd come out for the third act and say, can I have a suggestion of a household object in a room-size location? And we'd start to improvise, and there was a camera and the lights, and we would film everything. And then 3 months later, a director would come in, and we would start the writing process. So everyone would keep a notepad, and I'd say, on April 25th, I had a scene called Grandma's Attic. I'd like to look at it. We'd plug it in, and the director would say, I don't think there's anything there. Or, yeah, let's look at it again.
Okay.
And we'd throw it in the show, and we'd re-improvise it. So you could have had, like, the night before the show, slowly we would take all the material out of the first 2 acts and put in new material until it's a brand new show. And then we'd reopen the show with a new punny title.
Okay.
And so 2 nights before in previews, you could have had packed material through both acts. And then you have a couple of bad shows and things aren't working.
Wow.
And your scenes are pulled and so-and-so stuff is shoved in. And it's tough.
So you don't get precious about material, I imagine, after an experience like that.
You have to have, I learned to have backup stuff
Right.
because the other thing too is you're writing under pressure there. So if you're in 2-3 shows in a row and by the time it opens, you've only got 2 or 3 scenes per act,
Right.
you're fired. So I learned that if my Grandma's Attic got cut 2 nights before we opened, I was like, guess what? I've got Grandpa's furnace room. Right. I really learned.
Do you ever recycle material? Like, will any of this turn up in the Valentine's Day script?
Well, I definitely write for my life, but no,
Okay.
we really learn to never repeat bits.
Right.
Try not to do that. But I used to be a florist. That was my job going through theater school, and so I try to write, these lives
Right.
that I've had. So my character in I Hate Valentine as a
Okay.
florist.
That's bitterly ironic in a way.
I know.
Because a lot of people come in, I imagine, and buy flowers for Valentine's Day. Was it a big struggle to translate that one-woman show into a full-length screenplay with many characters? Was it a hard process to translate?
It was kind of the other way. I wrote the screenplay first because what happened is I got up and told the story of my real-life marriage, and I had a friend who was a writer who said, "Hey, don't do that. Don't tell your idea out in LA, land of stealers and liars and thieves." And so I thought, oh man, so he said, you should register it. And
Okay.
I called up the Library of Congress and asked them what the process was, and you can't really register an idea. So that's when I got the idea to write it into a screenplay and register the screenplay and then do it as a one-woman show. So it's like I was drawing from the screenplay. The screenplay, because it was registered first, I think is why I was nominated in the original category, not adapted.
Oh, okay.
But it's always, in the press it says, adapted from a one-woman show, and I go, all right. It was kind of a chicken and egg
Right.
situation.
So you had performing it in mind as you were writing it?
Definitely, yeah. Always. I had performing it in mind. I was thinking as a play, not really thinking as a one-woman show until I saw around town, like, oh, that's a good idea, and cheap.
Did inhabiting a variety of characters like that help you down the road when you were casting your film and you were familiar with all these different characters? Did that help in the revision process and the writing after that? That you had firsthand knowledge of playing the characters, so
Yeah,
was it easier to write for actors?
Definitely, and also it was easier to know what I was looking for when it walked in the room. Second City actors tend to be a little more sarcastic, and we don't really talk about our craft without, like, seriously, it's almost got to be a drinking game. We're almost embarrassed.
Right.
If someone ever said, "What do you think my character's doing here?" we'd be like, "Please," And so I'm not really into that whole kind of, I would say it's almost like a New York sensibility. I like more real actors.
Right. Less rarefied, more real.
Yeah, I really do. And so I guess I can kind of spot BS when it walks in the room.
Right.
And I felt it. When the characters came in and were just it wasn't the easiest casting process. We had a great casting director who brought us people that we went, that's him, that's him, that's her.
Were you involved in the casting process from day one?
Yeah, I got to sit in on everything. Very rare. These people at Playtone are
Right. They are the nicest people in the world.
in the world. I love them. I'm developing, I'm writing a script for Tom Hanks now for Universal, just a name drop. And again, joyous, just joyous. And I never really write for anybody. When all this stuff started happening, I got asked to write for other actors, and I'm not interested right now in doing it. But when Tom had this idea, I was like, sure, buddy.
Yeah.
And so I'm writing for him, and it is so much fun. He's so respectful of the drafts and just of the character. And if we want to change something, he absolutely will say, hey, I changed my mind, let's try it this way. And I'm like, okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Had you written any screenplays before My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
No, it was I know, it sounds ridiculous.
No, it's great. It's wonderful.
I think the lesson in everything that happened to me for people is don't listen to the odds. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to, the odds of you getting hit by lightning and kidnapped by terrorists are greater than your screenplay being done. Just if you want to have a story to tell, just write it.
Right. Have you ever gotten stuck in the writing process where you feel like, oh my God, I'm not going to finish this, or I wrote myself into a hole or a blind alley? And
Yeah.
How do you get unstuck?
I walk away. I definitely just walk away from the script. I put it in a drawer. I go and do something else. I recently was stuck, and I called my brother in Australia and happened to be talking to him, and he said, do you want to come visit? And I said, uh-huh. And I got on the plane the next day. And I have this luxury of being able to just take time.
Right.
And I went and hung out with him for 10 days and walked on the beach and just mulled it over, and some days didn't think of it, and then it just went, and there it was. I know where to... I've actually turned it in 10 days after I got back.
So putting it down is kind of the way you solve that problem for yourself.
Definitely. I know I said it before, but I just don't think you can force creativity.
Right.